Welcome to the Really From podcast, where we talk about culture, creativity, and breaking down that question, where are you really from? Welcome to the first episode of the Really From podcast. My name is Chris Lee Rodriguez, and I play guitar and sing in the band Really From. We just released our self-titled album, which you can listen to on all streaming platforms and purchase a physical copy through Topshelf Records. I am also your humble podcast host, which I'm sure you're probably wondering, what is this all about? So in short, this podcast is a little companion to our album where I talk to a lot of incredible artists and my friends about themes that we talked about on the record, including race, ethnicity, identity, culture, and creating art out of these ideas. In this first episode, I talk about being mixed race with Dev Bailey, best known by their rap moniker Pink Navel, and Nandi Rose, best known as Waif. They're both incredible artists, incredible people who I've had the privilege to play with, actually. They're so funny, they're so kind, and throughout the course of our conversation, we found out that we actually have a lot in common, more than we realized. This was a really fun conversation, and I'm really grateful that I got to have it with these wonderful people. Let's get to it. There's a lot of census information coming out that they think in 2043, in about 30 or 40 years, the majority of the country is going to be mixed race. And three of us are some of those people that are living in that reality and what that means to be in this new racial identity or ethnic identity, whatever you see fit. So today I wanted to talk to these two wonderful artists about their experiences with that, their experiences with the question of being asked where you really from, and how that affects them in their community and their art. So I love to give them their own opportunity to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Nandi?
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm really excited to chat with you guys. My name is Nandi, which is short for Ananda. I don't know if a lot of people know that. But on my birth certificate, when I was born, the hospital said, "Welcome, Amanda." And my parents knew immediately that they were going to have a problem with my name and everyone thinking that it's Amanda. So I've been Nandi pretty much my whole life. My pronouns are she, her. My band is called Waif. But in addition to music, I am also very into birds. I'm a birder. And I have recently also gotten into herbs and herbalism. I live in upstate New York, and so there's a lot of beautiful nature around here. And I've been blessed to spend a lot of the last many months watching birds and learning about plant medicine.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
That's so cool.
Dev, how about you?
I'm Dev. I am a rapper also named Pink Navel. My pronouns are they, them. I'm very excited to be here. I don't know what else to say. I also make toys. I like to cast things in resin and plastic. I don't know. That's about it. I like to do all sorts of fun and interesting things and learn all sorts of fun and interesting things.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. I want to see those toys.
Oh, you want to see one?
Yeah, please.
It's
sick.
You made that?
Yeah, and the head comes off.
That's incredible.
That's awesome. Thanks. Also, this is going to be an audio form, so no one's going to be able to see that, but I'll post a link to all cool. If you do you sell it online?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll post up a link on that at the end.
Sweet.
It's so cute. It looks like a Miyazaki character. If you watch those movies.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a great compliment.
It does look like a Miyazaki spirit.
Yeah.
And my name is Chris Lee Rodriguez. I feel like I have the most common names in all three cultures of American, Puerto Rican, and Chinese culture. And if you feel comfortable sharing your what you identify ethnically and racially, I myself am Puerto Rican on my mom's side and Chinese on my dad's side. So if you feel comfortable, please share as well.
Sure, yeah. I'm half white, half Indian. My dad's family is Irish, Swiss, and German. And my mom's family is from Lahore, which is now Pakistan, but was India before partition. So we are Punjabi on that side.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. My dad is black and my mom is Italian. So half white, half black.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Awesome. So I wanted to start off the question. First question for everyone is the album that we're releasing is self-titled off of Really From, and actually this is a really good chance to explain our band name because someone on Facebook or the internet didn't really understand what our name meant or thought it was kind of pretentious, which fair, but also there was other kids who who never encountered the question of where are you really from. So I want to bring it to you. When was the first time you have ever been asked that question, or the most memorable time, if you can't remember the first time that you were asked the question, where are you really from? And do you remember your response to that question, or do you remember how you reacted to that question? And whoever wants to go first, if you have one.
Yeah, I'll go first. I changed high schools after my sophomore year, and the first high school I went to was predominantly very white, and all sorts of things happen in that situation. But when I changed high schools, I was in a different school with a smaller group with an extremely diverse school body, and I got to befriend a lot of people from Nigeria and from Haiti, and they would ask me like, oh, where are you from in that sense, and I would always just be like, I don't know, Dad's entire history was raced, so not so sure. But yeah, that's like the one that strikes out in my brain for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I have a memory of being at the mall, and I was with my mom, and I guess she was in a store, and I was just waiting outside the store on a bench, and I had my hair in like pigtail braids. I was maybe like 8 or 9, and some guy came up and was like, "Are you Indian?" And I was like, "Yeah." Kind of like, oh, someone noticed me and like noticed that I'm Indian, and like that's kind of cool. But then he was like, "What tribe are you?" And I got very confused and like upset, and then his wife came over and was like, "What are you doing?" and kind of ushered him away. But it was like, it quickly went from being like a very benign interaction to like making me feel really like awkward and uncomfortable and confused, and saying that I'm half Indian. I've gotten that a lot throughout my life. Like, what tribe are you? Which I understand why, people would say that, but it has like made me, I think, a little reticent to like share my background sometimes because it's confusing, I guess. And probably it stems from those really early interactions. But I also wanted to share, I remember when I asked someone, "Where are you really from?" And this was, I was very ashamed and embarrassed, but it was a real learning experience. I was actually interviewing at a college. It was Yale, and spoiler, I did not get in. But the woman who was interviewing me, we were like chit-chatting in the elevator on the way to the interview, and she had an interesting name, and so I was like, "Where are you from?" And she said, "San Diego." And I was like, "No, where are you really from?" And she gave me such a look like, "Why are you asking me this?" And I remember at the time feeling like, wait, no, I'm like you. I also have an interesting name, and I also get this question a lot. So why is it not okay for me to interact with you this way? Like, aren't we kind of in it together? But yeah, that really stuck with me. I mean, I quickly realized like it's not really okay to ask that, especially someone you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, we had no background and
Yeah.
no rapport, and it was yeah.
And at the college you want to try to get into too.
Oh my gosh, I definitely ruined my chances in that moment.
Oh no.
It's real. I also feel bad asking this question because I didn't really have an answer to this as well, because it's more like a montage of memories of different things. I've definitely been in Dev's position where like Asian people, they see my last name is Lee, and they're like, I went to a school first that was very diverse, but a lot of Colombian and Filipino population. And they're like Black and Indian kids. And then I went to another school that was a lot like up to 20 minutes away, that was in a wealthier neighborhood that was predominantly white and Korean, and specifically like a lot of Jewish communities and Italian communities. There was like a year of my life where I thought all white people were either Jewish or Italian. Just like when I was like 11 or 12, I just did not interact with another type of white person besides that. So it's a very New Jersey perspective. But I remember a lot of Korean kids would ask me if I was Korean because I had my last name Lee, and I actually went to high school with another Chris Lee who was Korean, and we were in the same class, and I had to put and on test I would have to put Chris Lee 1 and he would put Chris Lee 2 just to tell us apart, and because the teachers couldn't tell us apart. But I've gone the same. I've also gotten Nandi's experience where like I've had like white people thought I was black people thought I were white. I've had this one girl thought I was both types of Indian Indian and like indigenous. Mm-hmm. I remember one time this girl, this person I worked at a camp with, we had like a wedding gig, and I was helping out with the wedding. And that after night, we were all hanging out in someone's apartment, and she had a lot to drink. I was very tired and was wearing just a robe and just like talking to front of us. And I said something. I forget what I said that was in context, but she looked at me and she was like, and she was from Manchester, UK, so she had like a thick northern British accent. I'm not gonna do the accent, but she was just like, Chris, which one of your parents is black? And I was just like, none of them. And it was during the summer, and I get really, really tan during the summer. I get like mad light skin in the winter and just get really dark during the summer. And she was like, well, you're really brown, you know. And I was just, wow. Everyone felt so uncomfortable, but I thought it was so funny because usually when someone asks that to you, it's almost positioning power above them. Because when you're asking someone that, you're like, oh, you are not from here. If it's from a white person, like, how you look does not fit into the frame of the American persona. So I have to put a thing on you. I have to put an item on you. Or if it's people of color who do that, they're like, oh, we don't feel part of this country. We have to be from somewhere else. And this person, I want to see if I should share kinship with them. But in this particular situation, it was just hilarious to me because she's just like sitting on a bed surrounded by me and a bunch of friends. And she's just really, really drunk. And just like half naked, and I'm just like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And everyone was just like, oh, but I thought it was really funny. But it's a really good transition. Being mixed race, these are things that I really like think about a lot, and which makes sense because most of our songs are about that perspective and that experience. So I really want to see for you guys, if being mixed, coming from two different cultures, had an effect or influence on how you moved about in your own community, with your own friend group, or in your own music scene, or going to school. Is anything you want to share felt like it changed your perspective or shaped how your perspective was going through these communities?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I grew up in a very white, homogenous town, and my mom was like the only one of the very few brown people. And my experience was actually kind of interesting when I was younger. I really felt special because I was one of the like different ones. I think when you're a kid, you're like trying to assert your independence and your identity. And that was like, I latched on to this, to my heritage and to the Indian side. And I felt really proud of it. And I would wear bindis to school. And had lots of like sari fabric around the house, and friends would come over and they would point to the photo of the man with the afro on the wall and be like, "Is that your grandfather?" And I'd be like, "No, it's my guru." But I could see it having gone a very different way, and actually I feel really lucky looking back, like, oh, I actually felt like it was this point of pride, and like this thing that I had that was mine, and that was my family's, and that was like our stake in the place. And it wasn't really until later that like I think I started shying away from it, when I would wear a bindi to like, I remember in middle school one day that like science teacher was like, "You have a squashed bug on your head." And I was like, "I do?" And I was like, "Oh, like, that it's not a bug." So yeah, it was like when I got older, I think there were more moments of feeling like maybe it wasn't something to be like parading around, and then you're a teenager and you want to be like everybody else. But early on, like in early childhood, I was really proud of it, and definitely didn't shy away from my Indian side.
That's awesome. How about you, Dev?
Yeah. Growing up, my dad was not around at all, so it was just my mom, who's white, raising me and my sister. My sister was the only person I really knew that like looked like me, and we kind of both came up like sort of out of touch with Black culture in a lot of ways. So when I started making music, I think that like being a rapper was like my personal relationship with Black culture, and really jumped me into something that I didn't really have access to before, or I felt like I didn't have access to it before, just being in the town I grew up in. Yeah.
Did you do like a deep dive into like old rap and like learning about the history of that like musical genre?
I it was a lot of internet like sleuthing. Like sometimes I feel like I'm not from anywhere but the internet, and that's where I like learned everything about Black culture, about rappers and all of that kind of stuff, and the lineage is so important in rap, and like studying that and like getting in touch with that was like very coming of age for me.
That's real.
As a teen.
Also, shout out to MF Doom. It's so sad it happened.
Yeah, the best to ever do it. Like, talk about lore. Talk about like lineage. He is like the originator, the true originator, especially of the weirdo style.
That's what, like that whole. I feel like that whole. I won't call it genre that you're in, but just like that whole tradition. I feel like the whole convention of just doing weird rhymes.
Yeah.
I think I saw Mos Def say once, Doom's rhymes as weird as I feel.
Yo.
And that was his beauty. His rhymes just didn't make sense, and yet they did, and it was so strange, and I feel like people connected with that too. And it definitely tributes to what you said, Jeff, about like not feeling like being part of any place. There's definitely a displacement that exists in you when you're kind of look like one way but are from a different way too. And I have that similar experience too. I'm the only one in my family actually that is Chinese and Puerto Rican, because I have an older sister, but she is fully Puerto Rican. She's technically my half sister, but we were raised together. But I am the only person that is mixed to this extent of this extremes. in my own family. I remember growing up, my elementary school was very diverse. My best friend, his family was from Belize, and his parents were deaf, so he had his own different perspective. And I had, excuse me, I keep burping. I have had Filipino friends and white friends and Latino friends and black friends, and it was very, very mixed. And you just didn't really acknowledge it because everyone felt celebrated. And then I moved to a very homogenous school that was either very white and very Korean, and wasn't really accepted. I didn't feel accepted, though it was very strange because you're in middle school too, so no one's really accepting anything, because you're still learning how to become a person and being a person. And so I remember growing in school, you would gravitate towards, like me personally, I gravitated towards underground music, punk music, and hung out with like the punk kids and like music kids, because that was weird music and that was loud and it was very aggressive and very like quote unquote anti-establishment. That was very strange and very regional too. It felt very like, my experience was very, very New York, New Jersey. Like my dad grew up from the city. And his best friends, I had like two different parents who had two different extremes. And we could talk about that in a little bit, but just having that experience of having mixed parents and working class parents as well, who were like, my mom's a hairdresser, my dad's worked at Costco. And they were divorced parents. My perspective felt very different from like wealthier kids in my school that had like lived in McMansions and had like huge the bar mitzvahs or parties, and so I really saw like didn't really understand it at that time. It wasn't until I was older, the idea of how class plays a role into it as well, of how it just adds to a displacement of the self, and really understand where you fit. And I feel like with music it's so cool because it's both very human and very ethereal at the same time. Like you listen to it, you feel like you're transported in a different place and you feel like it's from another world, but at the same time you're in a place with people experiencing it. And you're just in a room together. Like Dev, you were at like the I Kill Giants last show, and that experience of people being in a room together and like just getting to celebrate and be part of it, and you felt like you were on the same level. There wasn't any stage, it's just people in a room just playing music, so it's very very human as well. And it's hard to navigate spaces like that when you don't really, I don't know for you guys, but you don't have like a center that may be specific in location that connects with who you are, whether it's with your ethnicity. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly feel you on music being like this kind of great leveler that brings us all together in this, transcendent moment. I feel you just reminded me, talking about like displacement, and like lacking a sense of home. It's interesting because I grew up in one house in my little town. It was like very stable home, and that I had one home, not stable, and that my parents divorced when I was 14. But I've always felt this sense of wondering like where my place is and where is home. I've like been very obsessed with the idea of home and finding stability and groundedness. And I think part of it actually comes from not necessarily my own life or experience, but my mother's background and her mother's background, and sort of this like legacy of being immigrants and in fact being refugees. My mother's family were refugees from Uganda when Idi Amin took over in the 70s and expelled all the Indians, and there had been a huge Indian diaspora there at the time. And before that, my grandmother lost her home in Lahore when that became Pakistan. So just this, also thinking about not only our own stories of where we grew up, but that we take on the legacy of where we come from, and like those stories of of like our mixed parents and what they have brought to this country, or through their racial background. Yeah, I find that really interesting. Like, I actually had a stable home, and yet I feel fractured, and a lot of the songs that I write are about looking for a home and seeking a sense of belonging. And maybe that's not even necessarily my own story. Maybe that's a story that was born through me. I don't know if that resonates with you guys at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I sort of yeah, that is so cool to hear. I feel like that sort of like familial legacy is like something I was like yearning for, like in other places, you know. Uh, on both sides of my family, like there isn't much data. So I think I found that in, you know, studying like the art of the musicians in the past that I heed lessons from. But no, that's really cool. I totally resonate with that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. That's really interesting. You talked about data too, because I feel like, and this is a great transition to the second part I want to talk about being mixed in a family and being a result of a mixed family. And I didn't know this, but I guess all our parents are separated or divorced in one shape or form, which is actually really interesting. That I didn't. Nice to find commonality with people who have that experience. Because when you're young, you're a kid, like you're like, fuck this. I'm the only person who's doing this. You don't really understand how universal this feeling is. So it's really sweet to get to experience that. But to the point that you made, Dev, about data, I think it's really interesting. My parents are like two opposite sides of being of their culture. Like my mom knows a lot about her lineage in Puerto Rico, especially being Puerto Rican. Is a huge political stance because it's not. It's I don't want to equate it to Black American experience of being you're erased, but your nationality is essentially erased, where you're not you're an American citizen, you're not a Puerto Rican citizen, you're not independent, and there's just so much. It's such a melting pot in and of itself with like the Spaniards coming in and the African influence and the indigenous influence. So I think it's really interesting. My mom knows a lot about the history. I found out a few weeks ago that her great grandfather, so my great grandfather, owned slaves on the island, and they were the indigenous people that were hiding in the mountains. That they didn't call them slaves. I forget what the Spanish term they used for it, but they used to own slaves. But then on the other side, like my grandfather, family did not want him to marry my grandmother. And if you ever met my grandmother, I post a lot about her on social media. She is the cutest woman on earth. She's probably like half my size. Just a beautiful, hilarious woman. But at the time, they didn't want him to marry her because she was too dark. They wanted to marry someone lighter because it's a huge thing in Latin America that you always want to advance la raza. So like you want to advance the race and whiten the race almost.
I feel like it's the same in India. I mean, that's probably like that in a lot of places. Same
in Brazil, even like it's a lot of different cultures. Same here in the States too. So they didn't want to do anything with her because my grandfather's side, they kind of like they could trace their lineage back to Spain, but my grandmother's side can't. I feel like they've been in the island longer. So there's a lot of knowledge and data on there. But on my dad's side, my dad couldn't give a fuck about being Chinese. And I don't know if I can swear on this podcast for the things, but I'm doing it. So
it's your own podcast.
It's my podcast, so I'm shooting myself in the foot. But it's interesting. Like he knows as much as he can, but it's a lot of like false data or just misconceptions that he's always had. Because like my Chinese grandparents, it was an arranged marriage, and my grandfather, I actually found this out through my aunt who I reached out to because I wanted to know, because I'm same thing like you, Dev. I really wanted to learn about like my family data, about really understanding who you are to complete yourself as a person and become more whole. So I talked to my aunt and I found out my grandfather, he served as a chef in the Navy in World War II, and that's how he got his citizenship. They gave a lot of, because up until then, the Chinese people weren't allowed to become citizens through the Chinese Exclusion Act in like the late 19th century. So he became a citizen, then went to Hong Kong and basically like picked my grandma out of a book, and it was like literally just like picked her and moved to New York, and that's where my dad was born. My dad grew up. He like had his like cousins they hang out with, but he really like was the only Asian dude in his crew, and like his best friends growing up were Puerto Rican and Black and Middle Eastern, and very typical New York. It's very like diverse and mixed, but there's a lot of history that's lost as well. Like he can't really speak Cantonese that well, and the stories he would tell me is, and he would go to Chinese class to like learn the language, and the only thing he remembers is just counting the seconds on the clock for it to be over. So I don't know if you guys have had that experience with your families, if you feel like your family treats you different or treats you the same, because I know my Chinese grandmother didn't really accept my mom because she wasn't Chinese, and I want to see if you had any experiences either with your own parents or with yourself, and how you moved within your own family.
Yeah, the story my mom tells me a lot is that when she met my dad, she has a big family. She has 4 siblings, and including her parents, only one of them came to her wedding out of like disapproval of her marrying my dad. And yeah, she talks about how like she was 18 and she had to make a choice and was like kicked out of her house, and went to live with my dad and his family. And I think about that, and then in retrospect, I like analyze interactions I've had with my cousins and my grandma on my mom's side, like in the future, or I mean in the past rather. I think about old family gatherings and like just how I was interacted with, and my sister as well, and it's just interesting to recontextualize those sorts of events. I don't know.
Sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. My parents also had my grandparents, also had an arranged marriage. So that's interesting that we share that. But after my mom's family were kicked out of Uganda, they all kind of scattered, and my mom was the only one who ended up in the States, and that's where she met my dad in Michigan, at the University of Michigan, and ended up staying here. And so it's kind of interesting, like with her and her siblings, they actually, none of them married an Indian. So all of my cousins are like half Indian, half Danish, half Indian, half Scottish, but she was the only one who ended up here. So my sister and I are, half Indian, half American. But I remember there was a moment when I kind of realized like how strange it must be for my mom to have these thoroughly American daughters. Yeah. And, just like how I think I never really realized that when I was younger. And I think my mom, for her part, she talks about it now, like she really worked hard to assimilate after like losing her home. And she'd gone to boarding school in England when she was a kid and was like very much discriminated against there for being brown. And when she came here, she says that she just like really just like wanted to like be American. And so she just totally adapted. And so I think as a kid, I like almost didn't even see her as not American. And of course she's lived here for many, many years now, but as I got older and started to see her like as her own person, it was, just kind of interesting for me to realize like she had this whole other life. Like I can't even imagine what it was like, growing up in Uganda and England and going through what she did, losing her home, losing everything, losing her father soon after they left Uganda, and just having such a fractured family now, like they're all over Europe.
Yeah. Isn't that so interesting? When you get older, you see your parents as people.
Yes.
And not
totally.
just like these characters.
Yeah.
And I really understood like why my mom married my dad. Like they were not compatible, but like I can say that now, but like, sure they loved each other, but she was going to be kicked out of the country, and so he was like, we could get married.
Yeah.
And she just like wanted safety, and she wanted a home, so she ended up here. And yeah,
it's very human too.
It's very human.
Just find shelter. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's interesting seeing your parents as people and recognizing just the tiny things. Like, my dad has a thick New York accent, but I didn't really notice that he had an accent until like I was in college. Or do you ever feel like that if your parents are, if your parents are immigrants, they have different accents, or even if they're just like local New York, Massachusetts, they have that thick accent, and you don't really recognize it until you leave. Oh no, it's ours. Also, this is my cat that's chilling on my shoulder.
This cat is amazing.
She's
very cute.
Chill here.
Oh.
But yeah,
my mom has an accent. Yeah, my mom has an accent, and it's funny. Like, she has a British accent. Like sometimes, I feel like she can like lean into it when she wants. She's like, "Hello, yes." When she wants to like be very authoritative and elegant. So I like to call her out on that.
Oh, that's funny. My mom would have put on her like Puerto Rican accent. Either she'd get very like formal, because she was born in Chicago but lived on the island for like 14 years. So she, depending on what type of trouble I was in, was her type of accent. Like if I was like gonna get like I was in trouble, she would like do very low baritone, kind of like very serious, authoritative, like legal person. But then if I was like in like silly trouble, she'd like start using Spanish slang or Puerto Rican slang on me.
That's funny.
I don't know. But yeah, Dev, were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, both my parents have that super thick Boston, Massachusetts accent.
Wow.
And sometimes when I talk to my mom, I kind of go there too, but
yeah,
I don't know. Not other
it's
times.
Funny. Yeah, this is just so interesting to me too. Like my partner, she is from the Midwest. She's lived all over, but she lived in the Midwest. So like certain words that I say, she says sounds really weird, and certain words that she says, I say sound really weird. Like I say Chicago, but apparently a lot of that says that I'm not from Chicago because they say Chicago.
Chicago.
Yeah, it's like it's very here, and just like this is like a giant ass country too.
Yeah, all the regional differences. Did you ever do that quiz that came out like a few years ago? Maybe it was like even in the New York Times or something, where you could answer all these questions about like what do you call this thing and how do you say this word, and then it could pinpoint like where in the country you were from, and it was really accurate. Like mine was like Western Massachusetts. I don't even think I have any kind of accent, but like it knew.
Yeah, you don't really know until like it comes out a little bit.
Yeah.
This is it's so crazy. This is a good transition for the last part I want to talk about with our ethnic identity. Is its influence on you as an artist or as a musician. Again, as you know, our album that's coming out is all about culture and identity and really understand what it means to be mixed race in this country and in our own communities. So I was wondering about you guys. I was actually, before our conversation, I was trying to listen to as much of your work as I can just to remind myself. And there's like, if you guys, the people who are listening to this have not listened to any Pink Navel or Half Waif, please do, because it is very, very good. Dev, on your Navel Juice. Also, I apologize. I'm gonna read your lyrics to you right now. But there's like one line that I'm always like, I heard it was off of Navel Jutsu, where we said race ambiguous, face ambiguous. Gotta give space, so I'm thinking of too much. Who I am, who is you? I could wear a new tux. Just that first like the ambiguity just hit me hard. I was like, oh fuck, and then you start doing some like fat rhymes. I'm like, goddamn.
Yeah,
it's hard to catch it.
Yeah, that was like the manifesto early on. That song, that was like the whole thing. I don't know. I think nowadays it comes out more stylistically, and like I like to pick samples that I feel like maybe other rappers would never ever even imagine to pick. Like, I don't know if y'all know the band Two Nights.
Oh yeah,
No.
I remember Two Nights.
They're this band from Texas that I'm like obsessed with. But I like sampled this loop. It's just like on my new album. It's just this loop that I didn't do anything to, and it's just basically me rapping over a Two Nights song. And like, I don't know, Chris, you know this. Like, I was an extremely huge fan of Ico Giants and like that entire scene of music as a teenager growing up in Mass. And I've seen you perform too, Nandi, one time, a long
Where?
time ago. I don't really remember.
In Boston?
Yeah.
Cool.
Was that the Middle East?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, was it that show? That was probably that was probably the last time I saw you, Nandi.
That was a cool show.
That was 5 years ago now.
Oh
It's
my
gonna be
God.
5 years because
I
we're in
feel so
21,
old.
and that was in 16. No, that was in 17.
I think it was
Was-
17.
Oh, okay, it wasn't that long. It was still
Still, though.
someone completed a whole year of high school or is in their senior year of high school. If they're a freshman when that show happened, now they're a
wild.
senior.
Now they're
Sorry.
done with school.
That's so
Yeah.
cool though, Dev. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I like to take from that side of my life and bring it to rap, and I think stylistically that's how I like blend these two sides of my identity. Because I don't know, I find that like alternative rock and like music of that type is can be very like white dominated in certain scenes. So like, I don't know, I think it's just I'm gonna steal it all. That's how I feel.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks.
How about you, Nani?
Yeah, well, so my band name is definitely a reference in part to being half. And that idea of like being half something and kind of like trying to reconcile contrasting things that like follows me throughout my life and certainly into the music itself. Like I don't really know what kind of music I make, and I don't really know where it fits, and I think for a long time, that really that like really frustrated me. And you know, just even like Spotify playlists,
Yeah.
like you know, where would the algorithm put this music? I don't know. I mean, I'm not really on many Spotify playlists, and not that that's the be all end all, but I feel like it is this manifestation of like a little bit of an anxiety I've carried, you know, through the years of like where do I fit? So where do I fit, you know, culturally and ethnically, and where do I fit musically and stylistically? But I'm really coming to a point now, thankfully, now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, I'm gonna just own, like, I don't know where I fit. I don't know where, you know, where I belong, but like it feels good to just know that I'm occupying my own space, and I don't really know where that fits like in relation to other spaces, but like this little piece, this is my piece, and I'm gonna try to own that as much as I can.
That's so cool you say that because, again, I'm sorry, but on Lavender Burning, you were saying that too, of the trying to give a name to the place where my heart is, a country of shadows, hard to tell where the start is. One, I also apologize because I hate when people read lyrics that's supposed to be sung. So I feel really bad, but I don't
Really
want to
funny.
sing it to be more disrespectful. So I chose the lesser of the two evils. But I think that's such an interesting thing. That line always stuck out to me. I think I saw you play that before the album was released. I think did you play it on that tour in
I'm
2017?
sure I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that, and that was a heavy moment where it was just like really thinking about where your heart belongs. This is going back to what we were talking about earlier about like
Yeah.
where we fit in, not only in this country but in this place and like our own means of living, and just like hard to tell where. And what Deb was saying about lineage of how where is the start and where
Yeah.
is the end, and how you are boxed into something.
Yeah, it's more of a continuation, and I think like we've been taught to like want to have a defined sense of place and defined sense of self, but it's actually so much more fluid than that. It's this long lineage connecting us to past and future. And I wrote that song when I was on tour, and I was gazing out the window and like, you know, all the various fields and highways going by, and it's borderless. But I think that's a fitting metaphor for what we're talking about.
Definitely. I also, I had like two things I want to say, and now I forgot both of them. No, I think it's really interesting where, you know, you talk, we are all like half something else. And it's really interesting how we frame our own ethnic identity in a mathematical terms. You know, it's very quantitative, where if your one parent is this and one parent is this, then you are parts this and fraction of this. And I saw someone, I forget who it is, someone on Twitter, he is an activist. I feel like he's either Hawaiian or Canadian, but he's mixed as well. And it's really interesting where he's saying like 100% plus 100% doesn't equal 100%. Like you are all of what, you're all of your father's heritage and your mother's heritage, or one side and the other side, and mix, and you take ownership of what you want to take ownership and resonate with what resonates with you. And to your point, Nandi, about fluidity, I feel it feels very two-dimensional when we talk about race, and very binary. And I feel like it should be looked more in spherical, where it is, not to get like too anime, but you know, when you're just doing like that Super Saiyan energy, and you're like expanding the energy and trying to build this ball, what is inside that domain. I feel like to be something, or to understand your own cultural heritage or your own identity that you take ownership, is very three-dimensional and encompasses so much. And it's really hard thinking about that in terms of like being an artist too, because when everyone's an artist, they're trying to like not sound like this or sound like this, or especially in spaces and scenes as ours, like where it's like predominantly white, like with alternative music and punk music is predominantly white spaces, which is it's almost ironic because punk music does not have a white origin. You know, it's essentially, it's black music that has been co-opted, and especially with us, all three of us, I feel like we take in our bands and our projects, we take influence from different things, like Dev sampling a Two Nights song and just like spitting bars over that, or Nani, you saying like you can't fit yourself inside a genre because it's so much more than just a synth pop thing, right, or like an abstract thing. And I feel like with us too, we get bored so easily. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I hate to equate culture to flavor, but it's very like you need to like span the palette and include other stuff that we want, like, you know, want to have a jazz solo. I want Matt to improvise over this weird like 5/8 like Afropop thing that I'm trying to write, but still it's still gonna be you. You know, it's just hard. It's like, it's really weird to compartmentalize or put something in a box when it shouldn't be viewed as that. And I feel like the definition is very important too. And so expressing ourselves as cultural identity, I feel like we should not be we're not half of anything. You know, we're just a whole of all parts.
Yes, I'm actually full waif.
Full waif.
Epic.
You made that? You made that joke before on the.
I mean, you know, it's too easy to make, but I mean, I have thought about it before. Just like in calling myself half waif, I'm like tying myself to this like fractured identity, and might be at some point time to retire that name and maybe be something more whole.
Half wafer, full wafer. That'll be sick. But thank you so much. This is awesome, and I love schedules because this is actually ending right on time of how long I want to. This is really great. I really appreciate you guys for doing this. This podcast thing, everyone is really interested into it, but also have no idea how this is going to turn out. And I also have no idea how successful this is going to be. So
this is a lot of fun regardless, just chatting with you guys and Yeah, I feel like it's like
it was.
it's
Yeah.
something I think about a lot, like identity, and I never really like know how to talk about, especially like publicly. It's I don't want to like draw too much attention to it or like take up too much space, and so you're always sort of like negotiating and navigating like what's like appropriate to say, but you don't want to be like denying who you are and where you come from. So anyways, I just so appreciated having a forum to talk about this and to also hear your stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
And so interesting, we have so much in common too.
I know.
Very cool. Man, that's the one thing that I kind of like about this stuff. And I also miss about playing shows is they just can't talk to people and just get to know people.
Right.
Which is very difficult. So I think the last thing I want to say before I'll give you guys a chance to shout out is first, again, thank you so much for being here. I like you said, Nandi, it's really hard. You don't want to take up space, and it's really hard to navigate discussing things. But I feel like when things are spoken from one's own perspective and one's own lived experiences that are rooted in the experience of yourself, it has to include everything, and it has to include everything that you feel comfortable with, and talking about things that aren't usually talked about, especially in a culture as ours that tries to homogenize things, tries to normalize things, or on the flip side of that, fucking try to like market diversity or weaponize it. I feel like these type of conversations that I want to have with all y'all and with everyone else is that normalization is not to commodify it, but rather to acknowledge it and to understand it, and to really understand that we are a sum of different parts. And it's really hard being a fucking person sometimes, and let alone being
Especially
a person.
now.
Yeah, let alone being people who are, whose ethnic identities might have been erased or been results of displacements or migration or diaspora. So I thank you so much for taking part of this, and want to give you guys an opportunity to shout out any projects you may have, any things coming out. This will probably come out in March, probably after the album. This will probably come out after the album. So if you have any projects that you want to highlight around then, around any March time, or if nothing else, you could reference old stuff, or anything you want to shout out or highlight, any other organizations, other artists, other communities that are doing stuff, please feel free to do so. Anyone wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. First and foremost, shout out to the Rubaiyat Poet Gang. That is the crew that I represent. What else? It's March, which means I'm probably I do a monthly talk show called Dev Inside. So there's probably some information on the episode of Dev Inside at epicclub.dev. And Pink Navel. That's where all my music is located.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's March, and I have been putting out a couple of new songs. I have more new music to release this year under the name Waif. And I also have a Patreon page that I started during COVID times, and it's actually been really an amazing space to connect more directly with people and share not only music but poetry and essays and little tidbits that I'm working on. So it's patreon.com/halfwaif, and every month I redistribute 20% of my income from there to a different BIPOC centered organization. So it's a way to just continue to support each other and engage in these community-based feedback loops. And yeah, it's been really cool to get to know people through that and get to share some causes that I really believe in. So check that out.
Awesome. Thank you guys so
Nice.
much. Please check out Pink Navel. Please check out Waif. Please listen to our new album if you haven't already. And I will see y'all later. I'm still thinking of like a sign off phrase
Catchphrase.
for this thing. I don't know if there should be a sign off phrase or not. I don't fucking care. Whatever. But thanks so much, everyone. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Woo!
And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. This was an awesome first podcast. I've been your host. My name is Chris Lee Rodriguez. This was recorded and edited by me. I want to thank Nandi and Dev again for being part of this conversation. If you haven't already, please listen to the new Really From album out on Topshelf Records. Listen to it on all streaming platforms or order a physical copy on the website as well. Again, my name is Chris. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see y'all later.